All right, in 3, 2, 1. Hello, my name is Brian Fry. I serve as a National Collegiate Strategist with the North American Mission Board. We are here at Resonate Hitchhikers in the Shire of Washington. Can I call it that? I mean, it is people who just drove in.
Yeah, it's hard at this time of the year, but in March, it looks like a lot of the Shire.
Right now, it just kind of looks a little brown and hilly and that kind of stuff. Yes, it is a beautiful place. Lots of hobbits around. Well, we want to welcome everybody who has joined us from Eastern Time Zone or Central West. We know it's pretty late for you. In fact, we have a question for you. Why are you watching this video at 10:30 on a Friday night? Shouldn't you be doing some other things? But we are still glad that you're with us. Over the next little bit, here's what we're going to do. We want to tell the Resonate story, not in terms of all the little details that go along the way. There's some videos that do that. But we really want to focus for a little bit on the deciding moments. So those moments in the Resonate story where key decisions were made. So our desire for you is to think about your story and think about some of the deciding moments that God has led you through. So you've already met Paige Weiser. So this is the wife of Keith Weiser. You've met Matthew Young, right? So there's apparently some distance between the two of Keith and Paige here. And you've met Keith Weiser. So Keith is the guy who came up with the idea to plant Resonate. So you guys have been doing this for how long now?
10 years. We celebrate 10 years this year.
10 years. So we're at Resonate 10 right now.
That's right.
Okay, so you guys met through Baptist Collegiate Ministry, college students at, what's the name of that school?
Stephen F. Austin State University. Go Jacks.
Not one of those.
Maxim Jacks.
One? Okay,
That's right.
All right.
All represented right here.
All you guys.
That's
You're all
right.
from the same. Great things come from that school. Right.
At least
okay.
three.
I think so. Yeah.
Great things. So you guys met collegiate ministry there, and you decided to come up to the Northwest to do collegiate ministry. But did you think about planting a church at that point in time?
Go for it.
Not exactly at that time. We presumed that there was going to be something in the future that God had laid on our heart, but not at that initial moment, no.
So you guys came up.
No.
Now, Keith, did you have some kind of idea to do this?
What's that?
Did you have an idea about planting a church up this way?
There was a context of being able to know that God was leading us into a place. At that point, we didn't know what this looked like, so we'd really only seen one way of doing collegiate ministry on a campus, and that was really through a parachurch or through a campus ministry. So that was really the context that we operated from at that point.
Did you guys have any scripts or models for what you were going to do here? I mean, was there anybody else doing collegiate church planting that you knew about early on?
Not at that point.
Okay, so you guys moved to the Palouse in 2006, is that right? 2004, you move up here. For a couple years, you do college ministry, and then comes the decision to plant a collegiate church. So you said, we're not going to be a collegiate ministry anymore, we're going to become a collegiate church. So how did that decision go?
Yeah.
Over really well with your people?
So we're here, and we moved here in 2004, and in 2005, there's a moment that I have, and really it's a moment that's it's at a football game. It's at a WSU versus University of Oregon football game, and I remember it vividly for a lot of reasons. The first reason was that I had like one big jacket. When you're from Texas and you move out, you have one big jacket, and my big jacket was green. And so I remember walking into the stadium. If you know the Ducks colors, bright green, it matched perfectly. And so I began to realize I'm going in, I'm sitting in the student section at WSU, and I was like, this is not going to fly. I'm going to get beat up. I'm not going to leave this game, and because that's just a little bit what Coug fans are. So just a peek into that. So I remember taking off this jacket. So I was so cold. But there's this moment that in the midst of all this stuff that's going on, in the midst of the chaos of the game, there's just kind of everything slows down and everything kind of fades away. And I really begin to hear God speak directly to my heart. Just look around you. And it was this profound moment that here, 30,000 fans, they're gathered together. It's like you see your entire mission field in one place. And the overwhelming reality was that, I knew what was going on campus, and I knew that there's so much lostness. And the context that we were in was really one where we sang this song, about what a powerful name it is, the name of Jesus. And there was this massive dissonance in my heart between the power of the name of Jesus, the power of the gospel, and the effect that we were having with that name of Jesus on the campus. And we were operating a campus ministry, and the campus ministry, had 40, 50 people in it. And so God begins to speak and begins to say, I want to do something really significant. And, the context is thousands of college students here. And it was just such a moment of dissonance where I began to see, man, I believe in the power of the gospel. And now you've clearly identified what you want to do with that gospel, but I have no pathway to get to that. And there was a significant amount of tension to just begin to trying to figure out, you've just now said, hey, Keith, I want you to point your life. Here's what I want to do. And the gospel is powerful enough to do that, but I have no clue about the vehicle of that. And really at that point, I began to realize the vehicle that I have, the context that we're doing, we've done it for 2 years. There's no way that this is going to lead to thousands and thousands of people beginning to be connected to Christ. And so there was this moment of being able to say, is there some other method?
So you make this really difficult decision. We're going to switch ministry models. We're going to plant this collegiate church, which you had not seen anybody do. Paige, when Keith comes in and says, honey, I want to plant a collegiate church, what is your response to that question or to that idea?
Well, any good husband knows there's more conversation before that question.
This is true.
But
This is true.
but yeah,
I feel the rebuke.
we knew that church planting was in our future. We didn't know exactly what it's going to look like. So working with college students for the years that we had, you've maybe heard us say at Resonate, you win the campus, you win the world. And so to be able to connect with college students and in a church situation, in a new church, was exciting, but yet I also said, I'm not doing this without a team. It was kind of one of those moments for me with the Lord that I said, okay, God, I'm willing to do this, but I've seen people go before me in church planting, and it's lonely, and it's hard on their marriage, and neither of those things sounded really great. And so I began to petition the Lord for a team and told Keith, I can do it. Let's do it, but let's get a team first.
So you guys took this ministry model and you switched. Had 50 students-ish involved. When you launched, how many people did you have come in?
In that room over there, the crazy thing is we launched in this space.
Well, time out. You said in that room over there.
The foyer of this room.
The foyer that you came in was the place that we launched this church. And the reason was because this room was too expensive. That was the only reason. We didn't have any money. We had $6,000, and so we had to ask. And so we went in and we said, "Hey, how much is the lobby? We'll rent the lobby." And they're like, "We don't know. No one's asked us for the lobby."
I can't imagine why. What?
That's right. And so we decided. They said $200, and we're like, "That's the right price." So we decided to launch in the lobby. When you walk out of here, for those of you who are here not on video, we switched the entire thing around. The stage is where you actually walk through those doors. And so we barricaded the place you exited. Like, it was illegal what we did. We find out later that you can't barricade doors, right? That's just not what you do. There's no screen there. You might think, hey, what did y'all do for a screen? We took 2 bed sheets and we sewed them together, king-size bed sheets. And so it was a mess. We had a stage that was made out of cinder blocks and plywood, but 190 people showed up. And we were like, oh my goodness, this is way more than we could ever expect. It filled that entire lobby. If you think about 190 people, there was no space and no doors to exit, right?
What could go wrong?
Terrific. Yeah.
We got him here and kept him.
Okay, so you guys decide to switch models. You decided to plant a church out in the foyer of this building. And you have, how much money do you have in the bank at that point in time?
About $6,000. Yeah.
$6,000, you're launching a collegiate church. Okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop growing, does it?
Yeah. Kind of the models were like, hey, you have this launch, and then like everybody leaves and you're left with like, the scraps. But what we were planning on doing was we were having a launch service, and then like a month later we'd have another one, and a month later. In the very back, while something was going on, like a video, Josh and I are back there trying to figure out, hey, should we do this next week? And we're like, yeah, let's do this next week. We've never talked to anybody about whether it's available next week. We just make the decision back there on the hopes that it will be available to next week. And so, which is kind of the Resonate way, you'll find out.
Yes.
We go back up to the stage and said, come back next week. And they did. And they kept coming back. And by the 3rd week, it was so significant, we had to move into this room. And we just, again, took a step of faith that God would continue to align people and bring people into this vision.
So you don't have a model. you don't have a plan and you don't have money and you make the call to move forward anyway. Yeah.
What are you saying?
Yeah. I'm just connecting the fact that he's talking about risk a minute ago and talking about sacrifice.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are building this thing, and all of a sudden, you've got students coming over from the University of Idaho, where we will be tomorrow for part of our time. And this guy named Matthew Young comes along. So he's looking at what's happening. This thing's growing. You got 200, 300 people. In 2009, you're seeing this thing grow, and then all of a sudden, you get this word that your job is not going to be around much longer, huh?
Yeah, we had two big decisions in there. It was, do we join this team or what's happening at Resonate? And real similar to what Paige had said, the opportunity to be a part of a team. Let's do this together. We realized we could accomplish more together than we could by ourselves doing campus ministry at U of I. And then we got the news that our funding is, we're funded through the state convention to reach the campus, that was ending. And so then the question was, do we stay here, continue to be a part of this, or do we go look for another job that pays money? And and it was a difficult decision. And as we processed through that spring, we just had our third child, and we were asking the question, God, what in the world? What do we do? But what we had tasted already, what we had seen already in reaching the campus with the collegiate church plant and part of the Resonate team is that this was good, and that we weren't done here yet, and we couldn't imagine doing anything else but reaching the campus. And so we said, all right, we'll do whatever it takes. I was on board. Tried to communicate that with my wife, and she was, we talked a while about that, and then thank God he got involved and helped with that convincing, and through some significant conversations with strangers on airplanes, we decided, we're going to stay here, we're going to raise support and do whatever it takes to continue to be a part of this team, be a part of what God's doing.
Wait. You went from having a full-time salary to support raising to be a part of this thing.
Yeah.
So as you listen to the story, I want you to hear and think about the decisions to make sacrifices. When nothing is guaranteed, nothing is clear, nothing is set in the pathway already, as you watch the Resonate people, what they do is they decide to make sacrifice. They decide to be obedient to God no matter what he asks them to do. So as they continue to be obedient, growth continued to happen. So I would like to show you a little bit of the video. It happens around 2014 or so you can see what their obedience sets the stage for. So we'll see a little bit of video. We'll come back in just a moment with a few more Resonators. Thank you guys for sharing with us. Wow, what do you guys think, man? It's good stuff. Okay, so tell us what is happening in that video right there. I mean, what's going on?
A lot.
A
lot's
lot.
happening.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
yeah.
work us through some of the stuff. So that would have been 2014 at that point?
2014.
What's
yep.
happening then?
My wife Jess and I were the first team to leave this building, this place here in Pullman, and move outside of Palouse, outside the Shire, if you will, and go to Ellensburg, Washington. So you see that an opening shot was a guy named Austin Carter on our staff team on a moped in Ellensburg, Washington, with the wind blowing in his hair and the flag there. So yeah, so we left in May of 2014 and planted there in the fall of 2014.
Okay, so this is now the second most important decision you guys make, all right? This is the second decision to make as you continue to grow. So you've made the decision to shift from a collegiate ministry to a collegiate church. You guys, I mean, you're doing great stuff. It's just triple digits, right? 100 plus baptisms. You guys are sending people overseas. I mean, great stuff is happening. And I think a lot of people at that point would say, okay, we've arrived, man. We have gotten here. But you guys intentionally make the call that, no, we're not going to stick. We are going to go. Is that what you guys have decided, huh? You're going to leave the Shire. Yeah. What is going through your mind?
Well, there was a moment where Jess and I, we had just gotten married for about a year and a half, 2 years, and the idea of planting began to brew. Like, it was like, hey, this could be a cool idea somewhere else, and everyone started looking around the room like, all right, who's gonna do it? Who's gonna leave this established family, this community? And we began, looking around, and no one wanted to go first. And so even we were like, oh, we'll cheer somebody on, we'll help somebody else go. And then God began to stir within us a desire to possibly do this, right? We weren't going to do it. We were praying about it, right? We're praying about it. And so, whenever you say you're praying about it, that's it, right? You're done for. So we told Keith we're praying about it, and that was a mistake, because then next thing we know, we find ourselves in Houston, right, on the main stage at the SBC annual convention, talking to 5,000 plus people about how we're moving to Ellensburg. We hadn't decided to move yet. We were praying about it still, right? We're praying about this, right? And Keith said, hey, go out there on stage and tell the entire nation you're moving to Ellensburg, because you are. We're like, all right, well, here we go. So that's what we did.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes, yeah.
So I met Brian Fry in a rental car on the way to the convention center from the airport, and talked to him about your story, and then he asked us questions about our story. And so really a surreal moment to be on the main stage next to the SBC president and talking about how, we're praying about moving to Ellensburg, planting it. No, we said, hey, we're going there this year. So that was a pretty profound moment for us in our story.
You guys made that decision there. I mean, you basically say, hey, we're going all in with this stuff. We're really...
Yeah, that was a defining moment for us, for sure.
Okay, so what does it look like, Jess? I mean, you're enjoying life here. It's good. You're a key leader within Resonate World, and you're going to leave. So how old were you guys at that point?
We were 26.
We planted it when we were 26.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was, just turned 26.
And, I mean, everything from Jacob, from when he arrived at school all the way through, demonstrated that he was going to be a church planter, right?
Wow.
Okay.
Confidence.
Give us the flyover. I mean, how would he have scored on the church planter assessment in the process, right?
The incredible thing is, I think Amy Martin, Josh's wife, basically says, as you're trying to exit as a senior, hey, why don't you apply for
As a joke. I'm pretty sure it's a joke. Hey, you should do this.
She was the first believer in Jacob Dalton.
And so Jacob comes on staff. We send him over to Idaho, and if we'd have known anything about his personality, this is the exact opposite thing of what Jacob would have been wired for. But I mean, I don't know if you'd say you thrived in that.
I wouldn't pick that word for those 2 years. Yeah.
If you're to say, hey, Jacob is going to be this incredible church planter, this multiplier, this, I mean, you just wouldn't have used that word at that time for him at all. And so, in fact, he leaves ministry, goes to work.
Hey, but in my defense, though, right? In my defense, a long time ago, we had no team. It was me out there, right? It was me on the campus. No systems, no huddle yet, just nothing. Just go out there and go get them, bud, right?
Yeah.
So that was... In my defense, I'm introverted, so I'm not trying to go out every day on campus sharing the gospel. I wanted to hang out behind my computer all day. So that, but there was no one
I think there
coaching
was
me.
one guy. I remember you like having one disciple that you were like,
Yeah, and he moved with us to Ellensburg. One guy.
So before
Yeah.
this gets too heated,
okay, there's
continue
two
on to the
guys.
rest. Okay, Jess, right, let's go back to you here.
Yeah, I'm like in the
Okay.
middle of something here. I'm like, you guys need to talk, go in that green room.
So you go and you leave and you don't really have a script for what this looks like. What's going through your mind?
Yeah, I think like Jacob touched on, this was like a pressure point, putting our money where our mouth is. As a philosophy, we had said, what if we church plant? And then we were like, okay, someone needs to go. So it was hard, it was hurtful at times when our best friends would say, hey, I think you're called to go. And you're like, you're right, but I hate you for saying that, and why aren't you coming? So it was hard, just like as a feeler, as a woman, just to process leaving all of our friends. But also when we get there, there's just no script for this. Keith and Paige had done it before us. We weren't there for that. We hadn't seen it. They had also had some ministry that they were bringing people with them. And so we just had no idea what to do. And our team, and I think in some ways this was a good thing, we had no script. So we drew a lot of apostle evangelist types who were just kind of like, let's just go try stuff. And so our team was pretty apostolic. I think looking in hindsight, that was a plus of this. But there's also really big cons to that too, right? You have no idea. So we would just show up. We picked a spot close to campus, a Starbucks. We'd just show up every day as a team and read the Bible together and pray for courage, and then go on campus for hours and just sit down with strangers and say, tell me about yourself. We just moved here. We know nothing. So we just would like be creepy and sit in the student union building and meet people, and God started to allow us to see open doors through that. So no script, but it was hard. There were days we just wanted to stay inside and not go on campus, but we set a goal of saying, what if we share the gospel every day? What if we had 300 gospel shares within the first 3 or 4 months of us being here?
That's 3 or 4 weeks, I think. We landed there in
Yeah.
May.
Yes,
we
you're
wanted
right.
to share
Sorry,
the gospel
weeks.
as a site, as our team, every day for like 4 weeks straight. And so we wanted to sow the seeds of the gospel into our city from the very beginning. And so over the course of that first year, we saw a ton of fruit, a ton of salvations. I think it was because of our obedience to pray and share the gospel like crazy. Not to hide behind strategy, right? We love to talk strategy. We said, hey, our strategy is simply to pray and share the gospel and see what happens. And so, yeah, pretty crazy.
So the decision to move from a collegiate ministry to a collegiate church, the decision not to stay when it's getting big and everybody's starting to laud you guys and you're getting some attention, and they're saying, okay, we're going to take the next step. We're going to continue to risk. Guys, thanks for sharing your story, and we'll come back and talk to you a little later on. So I want you to see the next step, just a video that kind of captures the time frame that is right, well, it's the next step. Thanks, guys. Okay, man, so you see what's happening now, right? This thing's getting bigger, and it's getting bigger. We've seen one plant go out. And would you guys introduce yourselves and tell us where you are and what you're doing? Yeah, just do that real quick for us.
Yeah, I'm Craig Lovelace. I'm the site pastor at Eastern Washington University.
I'm Kelly. I'm his wife. I'm with him. I'm Chris Roughton, site pastor at the University of Oregon.
And I'm Tanis Roughton, and this is my husband.
So Eastern Washington University and University of Oregon. All right, so Keith, you're a leader of this thing. You guys are at a place where you've now planted successfully. Is there a part of you that's saying, oh man, we got to slow down on this thing. This is hurting, this is painful, this is costing a lot of money. Are you thinking that at that point?
You know, we see this whole thing happen, and we begin to recognize that when we get to plant, everything becomes like healthier. It's like this crazy reversal of what you would think. And so it begins to say, hey, this is possible. Like you pay the tax for it, you do it, it's hard. But then you begin to realize that courage comes when you realize that what was hard wasn't really as hard as you thought it was. And so we begin to continue to press forward. And that kind of leads us to what happens in 2015.
So we roll into 2015. Craig, you have been kind of that prototypical guy who can lead a church. I mean, we're watching you grow. I mean, you're studying your theology. You're watching all the systems and processes. And, I mean, you're killing it, huh? I mean, you're just the stuff, right?
I thought it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I graduated, got married, and then we tried to start a site on campus that August, like a month and a half after getting married, and everything I thought was awesome about me was like not helpful at all. And so we kind of slogged through 2 years of transformative, difficult ministry at University of Idaho there, and just kind of learned and prepared to plant, and really didn't know exactly where that was going to be for a couple of years, but we're praying and asking God to make it clear, because we knew we were called, even though it was 2 years of just the Lord raking us over the coals, teaching us to be like Christ. So, yeah.
How old were you guys when you took over the leadership at University of Idaho?
22. I was 23, Kelly was 22, and got married and started that site at U of I.
So you're there for 2 years, you're leading the thing, and you're satisfied, you feel like this is where we need to be, this is what we need to do, but then something happens.
Yeah, so again, we've been praying where we should plant. We had this vision, we wanted to be part of this thing that was happening. We'd seen Jacob and Jessica go out and plant a church, and we thought, we're going to do that too. We just didn't know where. And I actually went with Chris on a church plant spring break scouting trip. Great trip.
Yeah.
We went to...
bromance. It was actually a bromantic
It was good.
moment.
Yeah, I mean, our friendship really blossomed, if you will.
Yeah.
So, no, you're good.
You guys were dating at
you
the
can,
time. Or had just been engaged, I think.
No, I'm talking about the one where we went to Western in Oregon.
Oh, right.
So we go to Western Washington University to scout that out. And I'd done one of those trips before. This is Chris' first time leading it, so I'm kind of just there to kind of help out. And I leave Western, drive across the state, because I got to come back and meet Keith and Matthew and Kelly, because we're going to go drive over to Montana and check out University of Montana. And I'm driving through that middle section of Washington where there's just like nothing. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to worship, sing, and pray to entertain myself. And I'm praying, I'm going, God, it's been 2 years of asking you where we should plant. I know we're going to check out this campus. I'm still not sure it's the place. I've been there before. Would you just make it really clear? And God's been really clear with me a couple times in my life, and this was one of them. And he said, you need to rethink Eastern. And I thought, okay, I hear you, Lord, but we have a friend, a church plant that's there. They're our friends, and they've planted. They're on campus. They're not part of Resonate, but we want to cheer them on. We don't want to plant on top of them. But you were clear, so we'll bring it up. So I get in the car with Keith and Kelly and Matthew, and we're driving to Montana, and we're about 20 miles outside of Missoula to check out University of Montana. And I'm like, hey, Keith, I don't know if this is relevant, but I know we're going to check out Montana, but God said we should go to Eastern. And he's like...
Now, when you say Eastern, what do you mean by
Eastern Washington University,
okay,
about an hour and a half north of here.
Okay.
Yeah, near Spokane.
20 minutes outside of the place where you're looking.
Yeah.
You're like, Keith, not so much.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we shouldn't go here. We should go somewhere else. And Keith's like, we know we can't go there. Like, there's somebody there. We can ask. But so anyway, this is kind of a long story. But Keith calls them and says, hey, one of our planters feels like God is calling us to go do something there. How's it going at Eastern? And they said, hey, it's going well, but I'll talk to the guys. And anyway, they called back 2 weeks later, and they're like, hey, God gave us a building. Some people gave us a building in Spokane Valley. We feel like we need to close the doors on this thing on campus and move and take that opportunity. And we want you to come take over this fall. And this is in like April. So we think you're the ones to come take over this fall. And so Keith comes back and tells me this, and I'm like, "Oh, Lord said it. We gotta go." And our team didn't feel quite the same about that opportunity within 6 months. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so you were saying this is what the Lord's asking us to do. It's April. You're going to start in September, and
Yeah.
your wife at that point in time, she's
Yeah.
24, and she is pregnant.
1 month pregnant.
1 month
yeah.
pregnant.
Yep.
All right, so Kelly, what are you thinking when he comes in and says, "Hey, we're going to do this"?
Well, yeah. In in February, we got it was about 2 weeks of fighting on whether or not we were going to have a baby, and we thought, oh, we probably won't church plant this year, so let's have a baby. And God said, that's funny, and blessed us with a baby and a church plant. So it was scary, but we had been planning for so long to go that I kind of just was happy to have a place we were going finally, and to not feel like I hated the idea of it, because Missoula, let's be honest, I really hated for 2 years as we were talking through that. But so that was kind of like a relief. But moving there was a different reality of being pregnant, of leaving friends who had just had babies that I wanted to raise my kids with, and yeah, just being scared of the reality of being alone. I mean, we're not that far from here, but we were the only married people, and now we're the only one with a baby going to plant on a college campus where most people aren't married and have babies. But it ended up being one of the best things for our team, like such a blessing. Grayson tried to come early, and that was scary, and we were in the hospital for a while with that, and that was kind of the glue that held our team together and really made our team start to click. So that was a huge blessing, to actually be pregnant, if that makes sense. As much as it was hard and trying to figure out how to be a site pastor's wife, plant a church, have a baby, be sleep deprived. Still haven't figured it out. Now we're having a second. Don't know why we're doing that, but.
Come on.
So some who are sitting here, or some who are watching it, you think, oh man, that would be hard. I couldn't do that. I just want you to hear the ethos and the culture resonate. They say, okay, this is hard, and this is going to cause sacrifice, and it's going to be risky, but we're going to be obedient to what God is asking us to do. And that's normative here. This is what the leaders are doing. This is what they're seeing take place. And you think, oh man, surely at some point in time it gets easier. But every one of the couples that you'll talk to, everyone that goes out on the teams, there is a difficulty in it. There's a risk. There's a challenge. But they know it's what it takes to see the gospel extended. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the Routons now. So there is this meeting. There's this discussion of 21 by 21 that is taking place. Keith shows Site 5. And what happens to you, Chris Routon?
Yeah, so August of, was it 2015, I think, at our August staff meeting. Projector up on the wall, and there's this like kind of waterfall of all of these dots that show like, hey, Resonate's planting here, we're going to plant here, here's our vision up until 2021. Now, my friends, okay, some backstory. I'm living in the basement of a frat at this time in my life, okay? I'm a living advisor. I'm like, they're going to pay me and feed me. And so that sounds like a good idea at this point. I'm 23. And my friends are all getting married and having kids and planting churches. I'm a single dude living in a frat basement, okay? And I'm a site pastor in training. I'm a site pastor in training at this point. And so I'm seeing these dots, and it was like I'm like starting to get cold sweats, you know, because I'm like seeing these dots, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I saw that happen. And it was like the Jumbotron was on my face, but I didn't know it. You know that moment where you're like at the game and someone doesn't know they're on the big screen, and they're like just kind of looking around. So that's kind of the moment I have at this staff retreat where I'm like, oh, wow. This is going to be me. So about a week earlier, Tanis and I had been dating. About a week earlier, on our way back from our summer project, I had made a decision that we were going to get married. And, you know, I didn't ask her about it, but, you know,
You had made a decision
well,
that you
okay.
were going to...
I made the decision that I was going to ask her to marry me.
Okay.
So I was like, this really puts things into perspective. Single dude, about to want to get married within the next year, and then I see, hey, like if my trajectory is going to continue with our church, like I need to seriously start planning for our life to be geared towards church planting. And this is really one of the significant questions that we have to ask, I think, with 21 by 21, is what happens when this rapid multiplication starts to happen, and you got young people who are kind of in our system, as I was, as a 23-year-old dude wanting to get engaged and also wanting to plant really quickly. And so, I'm going back home to our hometown, and I'm asking her dad, hey, can I marry, I want to know if I can marry your daughter. And he's like, I want to know if you have health insurance. I'm like, okay, those are the types of questions that we need to ask, kind of push us towards maturity, right? So essentially, we get engaged and have this moment, multiple moments. We come back from our honeymoon and fly in to back home and load up our truck with all of our wedding gifts and drive to Eugene, Oregon. And I mean, I think we had been married for a week, less than a week probably. And we're on the road by ourselves, very vividly just looking at each other going, all right, mission first. Like, that's one of our core values of our church is mission first. And from the very beginning, we had to ask the question, like, all of these aspects of our life that have to be sacrificed towards what God is calling us to do, is putting Christ first in all things a legitimate thing? Is putting Christ first in our marriage a legitimate thing? Can we actually live this out? And I don't know if we exactly knew all of the costs at that time, because at 23, 24, you're willing to do anything for a short amount of time, right? But at that point, I think we had said, hey, we're going to, our marriage is going to be rooted in what God is calling his people to do as a missionary endeavor. And so that was 24th year of my life and 23rd of Tanis's.
So I'm hearing you say you're 24 years old, you've been married for a week, and you're going to Eugene, Oregon to plant a church.
Yep.
Okay, Tanis, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay,
ask
so
her.
people around the room, there may be some ladies in the room, and they are thinking about their husbands talking about church planting, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, it being at 24. Or some of you may, at home or here, you may be thinking, man, I'm 30. I don't know if we just need to have, make sure we have our kids before we go. Or, man, if we just have a little bit more support before we go. Tanis, at 24, walking into arguably what was the hardest year of your life, is it worth it? Was it worth it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I get asked that question a lot. Like, is this too hard? Do you want to go back home? But no, never. This was not a mistake. This was absolutely worth it. When we were both single, when we were college students, Chris and I had both had God put on our heart church planting and doing things with college students, and we came on staff before we started dating, and we both knew that we wanted to church plant as single people. And so when the Lord brought us together, it was a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't we do this with our lives? And why would we wait if this is what God is calling us to do? And there was an opportunity, and maybe we weren't quite ready for it, but we were obedient, and we knew the risk, and maybe not how much it was going to be, but it was so worth it. The things that God wants to teach you in your mid-20s that I'm still in right now, and the things that God wants to teach you in your first few years of marriage before you have kids, he can teach you all of those things while you're church planting. He can teach you all of those things while you are learning how to build a family amongst your church and amongst your team and build a community. And he can teach you all of those things while you're learning how to be married in conflict with one another. And yeah, we didn't have the typical first year of marriage conflicts. We had, okay, we're 4 blocks from campus, and we are trying to be adults and grown-ups, but we also want to live our lives towards these college students that are upstairs and live our lives towards these college students that are next door. How are we going to do that? What are the things in us that need to look like Jesus so that we can make the most of this and lead them? So
I think one of the most profound things that you guys reveal is really this question of whether life prepares you for mission or mission prepares you for life. And I think you guys answer that really clearly with your life, that really being on mission is created the pathway for your life, and that's really a cool thing.
Well, so everyone we talk to about the first year of marriage, everybody says first year of marriage is hard. Everybody. There's like a couple people who are like, it was a breeze. I'm like, what? What did you do? What was that? What did you do in the first year? But I mean, it seemed like across the board, everyone we talked to was like, yeah, first year's hard. So we're like, everyone else was also like, hey, church planting's hard. So we're like, well, let's just overlap them. Just do all the hard stuff.
Do it all one time, man.
Just
Get
do all the
all
hard
the
stuff in the
paint
first
out
year.
right now.
So, yeah.
Hammer down. Okay, so Keith, last question before we segue to another video. This is the one that was shown at SBC annual meeting this last year. It gives the 21 by 21 vision. But let me press into this issue. There are people who are listening in, people in the room say, man, it is absolutely reckless to plant people out so early. I mean, what you guys are trying to do is see people come to know Christ at age 18, and you're trying to disciple them and grow them, and then at 24, 25, 20, you're sending them out. Is it reckless? Is it too risky?
That's where this massive tension between what we understand as the American dream and even the American church collides with what we see in Scripture, that you don't do all this stuff and prepared to go out like that as you are going is really the key. It's not when you're ready to go, then you go. It's really, as we see the first 30 years of Christianity, it's such a beautiful display of people that just said, hey, we're gonna go, and whether that's because we're getting persecuted, it's not things that we're choosing that send us out, and so why should we begin to do that same thing, that God used all kinds of circumstances. And so we think that when someone is ready to lead, like that's the key, is to be able to say, hey, do they have the competency and the character to do that? There's no magic number.
So SBC annual meeting this last year in Phoenix, this video was shown about the 21 by 21 vision. Thank you guys for sharing. We'll show you a video, and then we'll give you some more, the rest of the story. Thanks, guys.
You never know when God is going to speak. Moses saw a burning bush. Paul was thrown off a horse. We were in a football stadium in the third quarter of the Washington State versus Oregon game. Surrounded by 20,000 cheering college students, I sensed God say, look at all this potential. I want to do something here, but you have to think bigger. Truth is, our vision was a stadium full of saved people, but God saw a stadium full of sent people. We just wanted to start a college church, but God desired to start a movement of collegiate churches.
On August 19, 2007, in Pullman, Washington, a part of the country where churches are few and college students in those churches are even fewer, we launched Resonate, targeting Washington State University. Within a year, we planted again at the University of Idaho. In 2012, we started our third site at the heart of WSU's campus, and it immediately became our largest Sunday gathering. 5 years after launching Resonate, we were a church of 600 people, 20 staff, and 3 sites. God was using us to reach the most unreached among the most unreached. We were being celebrated as a success story, and we were feeling the temptation to slow down and settle. But we couldn't shake that voice in the stadium saying, I want to do something, but you have to think bigger. Still not sure what think bigger meant, we committed to send out 2 of our best leaders, Jacob and Jessica Dahl.
In 2013, my wife Jess and I were featured at the Southern Baptist Convention in Houston as we prepared to plant at Central Washington University.
God used the convention and the relationships surrounding it to clarify the vision He had for our church.
I'll never forget our staff retreat that next year. One night, Keith had us open our Bibles to the story of Lazarus and the rich man in Luke 16, and we talked about our lives in light of eternity. Then the question was posed, if Jesus is precious, hell is real, and a choice is demanded, what does that mean for our church?
It means there must be urgency in our obedience. There must be boldness in our gospel proclamation. There must be multiplication at every level. Disciples, churches, staff, leaders, everything has to multiply. It means we must do whatever it takes to get the gospel to college students. Because there's nothing more powerful than the gospel, and there's nothing more strategic than college students being mobilized.
It was settled. We had a vision, and it was bigger than any of us imagined. Resonate Church, an urgent, multiplying, collegiate church planting movement, planting 21 churches by the year 2021.
The clarity of this vision has led us to mobilize our people. Since 2007, we've sent out 1,200 students on mission trips. We've sent a long-term team to East Asia to reach college students. Over 350 students have committed to church planting. Since 2007, we've seen over 700 college students baptized. The story doesn't end with the campus. It begins with the campus. Students graduate and move to cities as leaders. We are giving them a gospel worldview so they can shape and influence culture. If we win the campus, we win the world. Because college students plus church planting plus multiply everything equals kingdom movement. We don't believe we're special. We just believe it's our turn. Our turn to obey, our turn to be sent, our turn to do whatever it takes to spread the gospel, make disciples, and plant churches. Whatever it takes to make Jesus known in our generation. It's our turn.
God is doing something bigger, and we all have a role to play. The next time you see a stadium full of students, just think of what God could do if those students were mobilized for the sake of the gospel.
So there's so many different things that we could talk about what we've just seen. But I think the thing that is most stark to me as I watch is you're saying that we're going to go from 6 to 21 by 2021. How in the world do you do that? It's not like you're just planting a church per year. How do you make that happen, Keith?
I think the key is for us to begin to see, it's just simply we began to sit down and say, what's the math of this? Like if we begin to say, hey, we have to decentralize this. We have to release control. What happens here in the Palouse, we started off and everything came out of it, but we began to realize that we exponentially increase our potential when we begin to say the people that we plant, the churches that we plant, when they begin to seize their responsibility to plant, it gets so much easier. And so you begin to look at that, and what we've seen already is like, wow, it becomes so much easier when there's a responsibility from the planting church or the church that's planted to begin to think, okay, we have to do this again.
So you're arguing for, or you're actually requiring multiplication. So you're saying that every church that you plant out, how long before you want it to plant again?
That's what it's really hard for people to understand, because when we tell our story, you're like, oh, that's really cool. We want to figure out how to resource this hub, and we begin to say, no, there's all kinds of hubs. Like we're multiplying hubs. We're not multiplying churches, because once somebody begins to plant out, that's another church planting center. And that's where the really significant thing comes, when you just begin to say, what could happen? And that points back to the stadium. How do we do something like that? And it's really by multiplication, not addition.
So everything up until this point has been coming out of Pullman, right? Coming out of Washington State.
Right.
But that all changed this year because something happened from Central Washington. Jacob, can you tell us what happened, man?
Yeah, so a year after we planted in 2014, we sat down, this staff retreat is when Keith laid this vision out. Like, hey, we're going to do this. And so I'm looking, it's like Chris, I'm in the room looking at the map or whatever. I'm like, wait, hold up. That's saying that we're going to plant again in 2017. We just got started. Are you serious? Like within 3 years, we just survived our first year. You're already going to ask us again to do this in 2 years? And so I began to process, like, is this even possible? Can we even do that? Do we have the right people? Do we have the right leaders? Do we have enough people to go around? Can we even afford to send that many people to plant a new church? And so honestly, after the first year, I didn't know. I was like, we'll see. I'll pray about it. We'll see. Like, we'll see.
And when you pray about it, things happen.
I don't know. It's weird. Yeah. Prayer works. So after that first year, I didn't know. I was like, the Lord has this. We'll see. After year 2, though, I began to see this is possible. Even after 2 years, I thought this is still possible. For me, where I began to really believe this, I didn't believe it when he first told it. He was like, that sounds cool. Keith's up in the clouds often. Like, he's like, big vision. I'm not that way. So I'm like, we'll see what happens. And so I didn't truly begin to believe this was possible until really the end of year 2. So at the end of year 2 for us, we took a spring break trip, much like Craig and Chris did, kind of this exploratory scout trip, church planting trip. And so we went to Western Oregon University. And so on this trip, before this trip, we basically announced this to our church saying, hey, we're doing this thing. We're going to Western Oregon University. No one's heard of it. No one knows where it is. But if you want to come, it rains a lot. They need Jesus. We thought, who would want to come to this trip? We'll see, right? And 25 students signed up. So we thought we hardly tried, and there were 25. We realized we already have an amazing, I think, church planting culture at the core of who our people are. And so we took 25 students with us in the spring of, when was that, 2016, right, last two spring breaks ago. So 25 students came with us on that trip. And for me, that was when I began to truly believe that was when this is possible. I think Colin had a pretty similar experience. So Colin moved with us from Pullman, Moscow to Ellensburg and came on with that trip with us. So would you say that was
like a disciple, right?
Not really, no. I only had one. His name was Jordan Lowe. He's not, one guy.
So let's catch up the story. So you guys do this last year. And Colin, what did you do last month?
Last month?
Yeah.
This last month?
Yeah, this
like
last
3
month.
weeks ago.
What did you do?
3 weeks ago, we started meeting on campus at Western Oregon University.
So this is multiplication, huh? So a guy who's learning it, watching the system process. The call is made, hey, we're going to do this within 3 years. And you guys have done it. I mean, you've done what you've set out to do. Easy along the way?
I think even more than that, like what's going on in terms of multiplication, because they didn't just plant at Western Oregon, they planted in their city as well. Like, so the mindset is already established about, hey, this is just what we do, this is normal. And when you begin to sniff that multiplication is normal and students begin to understand that, you just begin to say, hey, we can do, crazy stuff. You just begin to say, the potential here is incredible.
Yeah, kind of like what Chris is saying, doubling down on things that are hard, right? Mm-hmm. We thought, hey, planting a church within 3 years is pretty hard. Let's do 2. So we ended up planting an off-campus service or site.
So you guys launched a venue out into the community?
Yeah, the same exact 6-month period. We launched calling out to Monmouth, Oregon, and we launched a downtown service campus to reach the city of Ellensburg.
And so Colin, too, he was the consummate example of a great church planting candidate, right?
Much like me, no, he was not. He was not. The way you see him now, you're like, dude, yeah, he's awesome. He's chill. He's got that steez. You got,
Back
he's like,
then, no.
Everyone loves him. Right?
Okay, give us the defining moment for you.
So about a year and a half ago, there's this moment for me where I was trying to figure out, hey, is this what I want to do with my life? Do I want to become a church planter? Do I want to give my life to this? And was really trying to answer that question. And so then came this spring break trip that Jacob just mentioned, the kind of the scouting trip to this city that I had never heard of, this campus I had never heard of. And it was really that trip that changed everything. And I think specifically, one of the first nights we were in Portland, Oregon, and we got to spend some time with a pretty well-known pastor in the Portland area. His name's Keith Evans, and we got a chance to sit in his living room. And I'd kind of heard about his past as just a college minister and then transitioning into a pastor. And my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, Jessie, we were sitting across from each other. We were just dating at this moment in his living room. And he told us this story about how he began this college ministry at Western Oregon University like 20 years ago. And how God just blew it up and then drew him to Portland to be a pastor. And he was a guy that I really looked up to in so many different ways and could kind of see myself in him a little bit. And there's just this moment where as he was talking about the school and things started to just line up, Jesse and I just kind of made eye contact across the living room, and I just kind of had this like, dang it moment. Like, I think 2 things. God wants me, and I didn't say dang it to this. God wants me to marry Jessie, and and I think He wants me to move to Monmouth to plant at Western Oregon University, and so.
I'm glad you clarified that. That's
yes,
helpful.
Really
that could have been really bad
for sure.
Yeah. But it was in that moment I was like, yeah, this is so clear. He wants me to do this, and that week, honestly, going to the campus changed everything.
Those trips have been pretty formative for our church, those exploratory CP trips. Tomorrow, Colin and I will be leading a breakout session on basically the timeline from like 2 years out to planting, and we'll talk more about those trips, because those trips we've seen a ton of students go on those trips on spring break trip, end up planting. So those trips have been hugely helpful for both forming teams as well as figuring out where we should go. So we've gone on multiple trips throughout the Northwest trying to figure out which campus should we go to next. So those trips have been huge for us.
So you guys make a decision to shift from a collegiate ministry to a collegiate church. You make a decision that you're not going to stay here, but you're going to go and send out. You've made the decision to multiply. You're making harder and harder and harder decisions. Keith, as we end, what is the one thing that you want to say to everyone? The one thing that you want everybody in Hitchhikers, whether they're here or they're at home, what do you want them to be thinking about? What do you want them to consider tonight as we close everything out?
It just goes back to the stadium moment. I think in all of our contexts, for us to be able to say, man, if we really believe the power of the gospel, the power of the name of Jesus, why don't we look in our context and be able to say, hey, do we believe that the name of Jesus, the power of Jesus, is being proclaimed in its power in the same way that the church is required to spread that? What does that look like? I think that's been the challenging thing, and for each and every moment, that's been the decision-making factor, beginning to say, hey, the gospel deserves us being able to sacrifice, to change, to transform, to choose new methodologies, to do whatever it takes, because on the other side of that are transformed lives, and the rest of eternity is affected by those decisions. I think if we begin to bear that weight, just more and more we begin to think about our context, man, that could open up some significant things that are blinded to at this moment.
So as we say goodbye to everybody who's watching in from at home, I'm going to ask you, if you would you bow your head and would you close your eyes? And I want to give you some space to spend time with the Father as we close. So would you join me in a little bit of prayer time? I'm going to ask Kyle to come up and lead a little bit of worship behind us. So it would be a mistake to come in and to think that we've invited you here to hear about Resonate, and we're asking you to, hey, go be mini Resonates, or go do this in your own neck of the woods. That would be a complete mistake. Here's what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to look at all those barriers that you'd say, man, we can't do this. Oh, this would be too hard. Or, man, we just got pregnant. We can't go. Or, man, I cannot become a multiplying movement in my community. I just can't do it. Would you just take a moment and ask God, what is it that you want me to take away from tonight? God, what is it that you're wanting me to do? What is the next step of obedience? God, is this story that I've heard, is my life a part of that story? Am I supposed to do something with it? We just want to give you space. Just going to take 5 minutes. I know you're tired. I know it's been a long travel day for everyone, but would you just take a moment to ask God, what is it that you want me to do?